I'm a man of clean lines and predictable outcomes. As a data scientist, I spent my days wrangling chaos into spreadsheets, finding the logic in the noise. I have a wife I adore, 3 children who are the center of my world, and a quiet life in a suburb that feels a million miles away from the humid, green fever dream of my youth. But some things don't stay buried in the archives. In 2012, I was a 20-year-old missionary for the LDS Church. When my assignment came through for Negros Occidental in the Philippines, I was ecstatic. I spent months learning Hiligaynon, imagining myself walking through tropical postcards. And for a while, it was exactly that. The people of the province were the kindest I've ever known. I remember the Bayanihan spirit, the way a whole street would gather to literally lift a neighbor's bamboo hut and move it to higher ground. I remember the endless hospitality. "Mangiyaw ta," they'd shout, dragging my companion and me into their homes to share grilled chicken, inasal, and heaps of garlic rice. They were a people of deep laughter and even deeper faith, which made their jokes about the shadows feel like nothing more than colorful background noise. "Watch out for the balete, Elder Andy," my friend June would say, flashing a wide, gap-toothed grin while we sat on his porch. "The giant up there likes Americans. He might want to share his cigar with you." The rest of the guys would bark with laughter, slapping their knees. I laughed with them. To a kid raised on suburban Sunday schools and rationalist Western thought, the idea of a tree-dwelling giant was a campfire story, a charming bit of local flavor. My faith was my armor. I didn't believe in monsters that weren't mentioned in the scriptures. Then I moved into the boarding house near the plantation. It was a beautiful, sprawling wooden structure, but it sat less than 50 yards from a balete tree that seemed to defy the laws of botany. Its aerial roots didn't just hang, they strangled. They formed a thick, impenetrable wall of grey-brown wood that looked like a waterfall frozen in time. The air around it was always 5 degrees cooler, smelling of damp earth and something sweet, like rotting fruit. I started taking my morning study sessions near its base. The shade was a mercy in the 100-degree heat. I'd sit on a gnarled root, my back to the trunk, lost in my books. The first time I smelled that smoke, I thought it was June playing a prank. It was a thick, syrupy scent, not the acrid burn of a cigarette, but the rich, heavy aroma of a hand-rolled cigar. It was so potent I could almost see the blue haze in the air. I turned around, expecting to find June or one of the plantation workers hiding in the roots. But there was no one. The sugarcane fields were empty, shimmering in the heat. Over the next month, the smell began to follow me. It wasn't just at a tree. I'd be in the middle of a lesson in a crowded hut, and suddenly, the scent of tobacco would bloom in the room, so thick it felt like a physical weight on my shoulders. I'd noticed the locals stop talking for a second, their eyes darting to the empty space behind my chair, before they'd force a smile and continue as if nothing had happened. It's just the humidity, I told myself. Or someone's cooking nearby. I leaned on my faith, praying for the distraction to leave. But the weight only grew. I started feeling a presence that was 8 feet tall, a heavy, silent observer. It seemed to be leaning over me while I slept, the heat of an invisible ember glowing just out of my line of sight. When my 2 years were up, I boarded the plane with a sense of profound relief. As the islands shrank beneath the wing, the smell of tobacco finally vanished. I went home, got married to Elena, who I met at a church social in Utah, and built a life where the only giants were the corporations whose data I analyzed. I haven't been back in 15 years. I haven't even thought about that tree. Until last week. It started with Elena showing me a news clip on her phone. A missing persons report from the very province where I served. "Look at this grove, Andy," she said, pointing to a grainy aerial shot of a familiar strangled mess of roots. "They say people are just walking into it and not coming out." I laughed, the old missionary habit of dismissing superstition kicking in. But then she leaned in to kiss me, and she stopped, her nose wrinkling. "Are you smoking, Andy?" "What? No, of course not." "You smell like a cigar, a really old, heavy one." My heart didn't just beat, it hammered. I looked at my hands. There was a fine dusting of grey ash on my keyboard that wasn't there a minute ago. I looked at the ceiling fan in our living room, and for a split second, I saw the metal housing groan and bend downward, as if a massive, invisible hand had just used it for balance. He never followed me. He just left a tether in my lungs, and it finally started to pull. Elena sat down next to me, her eyes bright with a sudden, uncharacteristic excitement. "You know, the kids are old enough. My parents want us to come home this summer. I think we should go back to the Philippines, Andy. Just for a few weeks." I looked at her, and for a second, her eyes seemed to reflect a faint amber glow that wasn't coming from the TV. I felt a surge of desire to go. Not a want, but a biological command. My thumb moved on its own, scrolling through the travel app on my phone. The Book Now button was a bright, clean blue. I stared at it. My thumb hovered over the screen.